The vascular tissue is only in the center, though, in the root. When it gets up into the stem, it changes, and we're going to look at the stem and the leaves in a minute. Yeah.
What did you say diffuses into the vascular tissue? Like you said.
Well, water and minerals, but there's right around the vascular tissue is a ring of cells. Actually, you can see it right here, and they're kind of like a berry. They're very selective in what gets into the actual vascular tissue.
But so, nothing like from the ground tissue is going into the vascular tissue, right? It's just from the ground going into the vascular tissue?
Well, if it's going to diffuse in from the outside, it's going to have to diffuse through the epidermis, through the ground, and then get into the vascular tissue to be transported to the rest of the plant. And it is this, obviously this is somewhat selective, but the layer right around the actual vascular tissue is extremely selective in what minerals go through and how many minerals and all that. So it kind of really controls what gets transported into the plant. Okay, just to kind of show you another picture, but also to introduce you to some different terminology. This is actually a root tip. So basically the root cap is kind of the hard cells because as the root grows, it pushes through the soil, and you don't want to basically fray up the root. There's something really unusual about plants that's kind of different from us, and that is, you guys know what stem cells are, right? They're undifferentiated, they haven't become a particular kind of cell. We still have, of course, embryos are all stem cells, but we have some stem cells in various places. We have some stem cells in our bone marrow, which become red and white blood cells. We have stem cells in our bone, which make our bone grow in width. They become bone cells. In plants, they only grow from areas of stem cells, and those are called meristems, okay? So the only place the root grows from is in the meristem. So it's like right in this region. So that's the only region of the root that really undergoes mitosis. And as it does, the cells divide, and then they're rectangular, so they're like half the size of a normal cell, but when they grow, then they kind of push. So they're basically growing from here. These are dividing and then pushing the root down through the soil. It also pushes up. So basically the whole root grows out of that meristematic region. Okay, we're going to come back to meristems in a little bit. But if you look at the root, again, this is nice and color-coded. We basically have, it says protoderm. It's a fancy name for the dermal tissue that's around the root. And then we have the ground tissue here, and then here is our vascular tissue in the middle. I showed you a cross-section before. Okay, now I'm showing you a longitudinal section. Those terms make sense?
Yeah.
So like if you were gonna section my arm and look at it, if you cut it this way and looked at it, that would be a longitudinal section. If you cut it this way and we're looking in on it, that would be a cross section. Okay. So what you should know out here is, again, it's just the different tissues. The term stele is just the name of the vascular tissue when it's in the root. It's only called that in the root. Just so you would recognize that. And then the root hairs, it's really important to understand what those are. Those are extensions of epithelium that are coming off the root, and they increase the absorptive area of the root. Because remember, what's the job of the root? It's an organ, and what's it? Yeah, to absorb minerals and water, and then the vascular system transports it to the rest of the plant. So we want it to be as absorptive as possible.
Is the stele S-T-E-L-E or S-T-E-L?
E-E-L-E, I think. Is it spelled different on the slide?
Yeah. No, it spells different things.
Oh, yeah. Okay, now I'm not sure. I thought it had two E's, but I don't know. That I can check. Oh, gosh. Should have animated. Okay, so we have the three organs, and we kind of went through them, but then you can actually divide it into the root and the shoot system, okay? The shoot system would include everything that's above the ground. So the shoot system would be your stem and your leaves, and also your flowers, which are actually just modified leaves for reproduction, okay? So, and then you have your root system. So it's just a little bit of details. Roots on the left, just that it's sucking up water and minerals. And we already went over tap roots, which dicots have, and fibrous roots, which monocots have. And I showed you a picture. So we should be good on the roots. The shoots, there's a little bit of vocab. Of course, when you think about what are the shoots for, you know that, because we're talking about the leaf and the stem. So its job is, the stem is holding up the leaves are collecting CO2, and doing photosynthesis. So that's like the main thing that's going on. Also, you're transporting the sugar like around the plant in the shoot system. Okay? The vocab's at the bottom, but I think it's going to be easier to look at the vocab just by looking at the pictures. I put two because they show different things. So basically the vocab that you might not be familiar with, we already went over taproot, and then the parts that grow out are lateral. But we know the stem, of course, and the leaf. We know those vocab in terms. But basically we have buds and nodes. The node is where the leaf is attached to the stem, okay? And the bud is where new growth is coming off. So you're going to grow a whole new stem on there where the buds are. So that's a bud, there's a bud up there, there's a bud at the top, so that's where new growth is going to come. There's always buds at the top, that's how it's going to grow in height. And then the what's called an axillary bud, meaning it grows out to the side, those buds are going to make it bushier, so it's going to grow a lot more limbs that way. Yeah.
Then how come they use the term bud for like the flower part? If the flower's gonna bloom, then it's not necessarily that it's like growing an extension.
I mean, it's gonna, you can also call bud the part that's gonna become the flower, but the flower really is just a leaf. It's a modified leaf. So that it only grows in response to hormones at certain times of the year. Okay. So we have the node, we have the bud, and then the last vocab is the petiole, which is the little part, that little thing that attaches the leaf to the node. Okay, and that vocab's on the previous slide. So it just kind of shows you various vocabulary with roots and root hairs. You guys can like look at that and study. Okay, this is just showing you monocots and dicots. These are real pictures. Just to kind of get the structure and to see that they really are different. Again, monocots are what? Name me a monocot.
Grass. Okay,
grass. So hopefully you're picturing it, parallel veins, flowers in threes. But if we look at the root in a cross section, you can see again, what's the outside? Dermis or dermal tissue, and then here. Ground, and then here? Vascular. And the vascular is made up of what two kinds of? Xylem and phloem tissue. If you look here, we have the same thing. We've got the dermis, we've got the ground, but you can see that the stele, or the vascular tissue, which is in the center, looks completely different. The xylem and phloem are just arranged differently. When it gets up into the stem, I kept them on the same side. This is the dicot and this is the monocot. These are the vascular bundles, the xylem and the phloem. And this is the dicot. They're actually arranged in a ring. And that's going to be important because that's what allows the secondary growth and for it to get fatter and to become wood. Okay, because it's the stem, obviously, that actually becomes the wood of the plant, not the roots or the leaves. Okay? So that just kind of hopefully helps you get that. And then that's the roots, the stem, and the leaf, which you should already know. Okay, hopefully you recognize that. So just to remind you, on top is our dicot or our C3 plants, or what we say are our normal plants. We've got our epidermis, which again is the kind of tissue. Epidermis is dermal tissue. And then we have
Tissue.
yeah, the photosynthetic parts, the mesophyll and everything, the palisades and spongy, right, that's all the ground tissue, and then the vascular tissue is the xylem and the phloem, and that's in the leaf. So hopefully we remember all that. This, hopefully you'll recognize, you might not remember it as well, but this is a C3, C4 or monocot. And basically, do you remember the bundle sheath and the mesophyll cells? And the whole adaptation, here's the vein in the middle. So basically, the main photosynthesis takes place in the bundle sheath. Did you remember the whole thing about PEP and PEPCO in the mesophyll cells here? So they're binding up CO2, dropping it off in here where the photosynthesis is happening next to the vein. What's the major disadvantage